Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Paranormal News. Tonight's article comes from knoxpages.com, and the headline is The Legend of Sarah's Grave, Greer's Ghost Story. It was written by Mark Sebastian Jordan, who is a Knox Pages correspondent, and it was published on Halloween 2020. Greer, long ago. It was a place where teenage boys would bring their dates after high school sock hops or football games. They would park their Studebakers at the intersection of two lonely country roads outside Greer, under the pale light of the moon. As the Mohican River rippled softly in the night, the young men would tell their girls that this forgotten place was the location of Sarah's grave, a place haunted by a long-dead witch. With any luck, the girl would get a chill and snuggle a little closer to her guy. He no doubt hoped she wouldn't notice his smirk. That was the gist of the story when I talked about it with David Greer, a descendant of the founders of the village of Greer in eastern Knox County, years ago for a Mount Vernon news story on the legend. Greer said that the version of the story he heard as a youth was that Sarah was supposedly a witch, decapitated by her jealous husband, who then buried her beside the road near their house, without her head. The ghost story claimed that Sarah still walked Alum Rock Road looking for her head. Numerous, sometimes baroque versions of the tale are still floating around out there, some centered on the abandoned building that no longer stands near the intersection. Another version of the legend had it that Sarah was a girl who died in a house fire and was buried there. So where is there? You'd never notice it as a place at all today. If you drive out of Greer on Brinkhaven Road on the eastern side of the Mohican River, you will first go south and keep your eyes open for possible bald eagle sightings along the river just for fun. Then turn east across the fields, following the general course of the river. Brinkhaven Road turns south and crosses a bridge over the river. But if you continue straight onto a smaller road instead of turning south, you are on Alum Rock Road. Just over the Holmes County line, there is an intersection with another road. The intersecting road is Richland Township Road 16, and the one that continues along the low ground is Township Road 17. My guess would be that Township Road 16 is the actual Alum Rock Road, as it abruptly climbs steeply up onto Kaler Ridge, passing many outcroppings of rock along the way that would have been mined for alum by early settlers. Township Road 17, the low road, was once known as Old Mill Road, evidently from the sawmill that once stood there, according to an 1875 map. But there's not much to notice about the intersection, except that between the intersection and the Mohican River, there's a small patch of overgrown land with an old evergreen among the trees. But that's an odd detail. Evergreens don't tend to pop up by themselves in the woods of Appalachia, which Holmes County officially is part of, unless they are planted there. Yet why on earth would someone plant an evergreen here? The reason is that it is the kind of place where evergreens might be planted as symbols. Evergreen as in always living, or at least waiting for resurrection. Once long, long ago, it was a cemetery. It was so long ago that it isn't even marked on the 1875 Holmes County Atlas, suggesting that it had already been largely forgotten by then. Dr. Joseph Poole, who owned a cabin nearby, told me that when he bought his property in the 1960s, the previous owners told him that the patch of land between the river and the road had been a pioneer cemetery, where both settlers and American Indians were buried. The settlers of the rugged area were families from the Alsace-Lorraine region, along the border of France and Germany. They buried some of their people in this valley cemetery, but also in the graveyard attached to the St. Joseph Mission. Father Jean Baptiste Lamy project up on Kaler Ridge, overlooking the valley. which we have discussed before in these columns. The Civil War's infamous Fort Fizzle is just a few miles away from here, too. It's an area where the past doesn't seem that far away. Who then was Sarah? I finally found what may be the nugget of truth from which the legend grew when I talked to Brad Kaler of Danville, a descendant of the family whose name is on the overlooking ridge. Kaler said that the story had been passed down through his family, that Sarah was a woman who was traveling aboard a covered wagon headed west. Illness struck the family, and Sarah died. The family had no intention of settling in the gnarled hills of Holmes and Knox counties, so they did the only thing they could. They buried Sarah beside the road, on a bluff overlooking the Mohican River, and then they continued on, never to return. Other bodies were planted there in the early years of settlement, and someone was even thoughtful enough to plant that evergreen to symbolize the continuation of life in heaven. But the cemetery's earthly existence was sad. No longer used, the cemetery was eventually forgotten. The few headstones there were vandalized by teenagers trying to foolishly demonstrate their lack of fear of death by killing the memory of those gone long before them. Dr. Poole recalled the last of the cemetery's headstones being chucked over the bluff into the river by vandals decades ago. He thought that the last stone to go had the name Schumann or something like that carved on it. Unless it has been preserved in the mud at the base of the cliff, we'll never know. In the end, Sarah's grave proved to be a real place, holding a real fragment of human memory, almost obliterated by exaggeration and mischief. But the veil is thin this time of year. Let's hope that Sarah's shade hears us remember her and her tragic passing, and that she forgives those who forgot her. And that is the end of this article. So basically, this is a ghost story, a legend, if you will, that is told in this area. And they're saying that the nugget of truth here is that there was actually a woman named Sarah who died there. But she just died of illness on her trip west in a covered wagon, and they buried her by the side of the road. So that turned into a legend where they talk about Sarah being a witch who got her head cut off by her husband who was jealous. And then he buried the body beside the road. And the legend is that Sarah still walks along that road looking for her head. It's interesting to me to read this because it kind of points out what we talk about a lot on Staring into the Abyss, that most of these local legends and old ghost stories and stuff like that all come from a nugget of truth. There's something that is real about them. Now, there's a lot that's exaggerated about them and a lot that's complete fiction and BS. But there's always this little nugget of truth whenever you research these things that you say, oh, well, it's based on this. And this is a perfect example of that because there's really nothing similar between what actually happened and the legend. In reality, she never lost her head. She just got sick and died, and they buried her. But the story that develops over the years is that she got her head cut off by her jealous husband. So that shows you how twisted these events can become when they go into the realm of legend sometimes. So I hope that you enjoyed this article. It was kind of interesting to me. I enjoy kind of finding that nugget in the different legends. It's kind of cool to get an idea of that. So if you did enjoy the video, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, all that jazz, and I will catch you on the next one. Until I speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do I. Bye-bye.